Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Gittin Kaf Daf. Phew, that was tough. Gittin Daf Kaf Chet. Let me share my screen and we will get started. The Mishnah on the top of Kaf Zayin Amid Aleph discussed a messenger who lost the get that he was bringing to his wife, to not his wife, to the wife, to the wife of the person who sent it. And we said if he found it immediately, so then we can assume that it's the same get, so the document remains valid. But if he didn't find it immediately, we're worried that this is not the same get, even though it has the same names on the document. Maybe there's somebody else with the same name. So we're now going to pick up at the two dots on Kav Zayin Mabet. I know that we did this a little bit yesterday, but we're going to then detail what the halacha is, and so I didn't want to just jump into the halacha of who we paskin like, but might as well go over the 6 different opinions that are provided. So let's take a look, and we'll go through it. So the imlab pasul. So if in fact not, if it wasn't found right away, so then the get is not going to be valid. So Tana Rabbanan, ezul shalola alter. What's the amount of time that makes a get not immediate, not right away? So Rabbi Nassan Omer, so opinion number 1, Shishaha Kadesh Ta'avur Shiyara V'Tishra, that it'll be the amount of time that it takes for the camp to go by and to essentially for the caravan to go by and to camp. So now what exactly is V'Tishra? So there's a discussion between Rashi and Tosfos. So let's take a look. Rashi in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up. Shir, this is the amount of time that a caravan can go by to pass over to there, and set up camp. So for Rashi, it's mostly about the setting up camp. However, Tosfos adds a very interesting and I think very logical explanation. If we take a look at the second to last Tosfos on the daf, Shetavor She'arav V'Tishra, Mefarish Rabbeinu Tam, that Rabbeinu Tam explains V'Tishra Lashon Seuda, that the language of Tishra is about creating a meal. Kamo Shirusa, as we given an example from Maseches Tanis, that refers to a meal. Demitoch Shemotzian Kalehem, that because they take out their utensils, Kedeilis owed in order to have a meal, Chayshin and Shem and Nafal Mehem. Right? The point is for Rashi, it's just about their passing by and having a reasonable prospect of somebody dropping. But for Tosfos, it's more than that. We need to create an opportunity for somebody to drop something. If they're just walking by, there's no real opportunity for something to fall out. You're walking by. It's like driving by in a closed car. Why would you expect that anything would fall out of the car? Of course not. So but if you stop, if you pull over, that's where you could lose something. And so that's exactly what Tosfos is suggesting in the name of Rabbeinu Tam. So, okay, so that's opinion number 1. Opinion number 2, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Kadesh Yehei Adam Omed Beroeh Shelo Avar Sham Adam. It's not about the amount of time. So let's just translate. The point is that it's as long as somebody is standing there and sees that nobody passes by. So as long as that's the case, so then there's no opportunity, and it doesn't make a difference whether there's a theoretical amount of time. Take a look, and if you don't see anybody, it could be a long time, and you'll be fine. So that's opinion number 2. V'yesh omrim, and some say that it's that same basic idea, but shelo shah adam sham, that nobody paused there. So again, this has some aspects of the machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos on opinion number 1, but opinion number 3 is essentially saying that immediately continues as long as the person standing there sees that no one stayed there, no one paused there for any amount of time, so that there was no opportunity for anybody to lose anything. And so if in fact there was somebody that happened to be there and saw that nobody else was doing anything, no other caravan was going by, well then, as long as you're still searching for it, I sort of view here the messenger freaking out and saying, oh my gosh, I lost the get. What am I going to do? And he goes around and he searches and he searches. And the point is according to these last two views, as long as he knows that either no one has gone by, or even more so that no one has actually stopped by, so then he doesn't need to worry that if in fact he finds the get, even if it's many hours later, if he finds the get, he can rely on the fact that it was the one that he dropped. All right, Rebbe says, no, that's not the amount of time. Rather, kidei lichtov es a get. It's not about the travelers, it's about the creation of the get itself. And so let's focus on how long it takes to write a get. Rabbi Yitzchak says, no, kidei likroto, it's in order to read it. And Acherim Omrim, no, kidei lakosvo vilikroso. It's a combination of those last two opinions about Rebbe and Rabbi Yitzchak, that you actually have to be able to need an amount of time to write it and to read it. All right, Vafilu Shah, and even if it was lost, the Yeshbo Simanim, if there were marks on it, this is as the Brisa continues, Me'idin Alav, then you are allowed to testify, you testify about those marks, and then the get is considered to be the get that you lost to Amrei. So a second, so that, what they're saying is, Nekev Yeshbo Bitzad Os Plonis, that if in fact there was a small hole in the get next to a particular letter, well, then we'll say that is a sufficiently identifying mark. And if you have that mark and you can testify about it, well, then we'll treat this as the get that you lost. But you can't, but when it comes to signs about the structure of the document itself. So for example, Rashi says, Simanim, first of all, Rashi says 4 lines up, Simanim, Muvhakim, that basically there are two kinds of signs on the document. I don't know whether this was covered yesterday, but there are sort of distinguishing identifying marks, meaning really, more than just non-distinctive marks that are, signs that, but really signs that would be unique for this particular person in this particular document. So when you have a hole that's next to a known letter, well, then that's going to be, that's the nature of sort of a parchment kind of document, or a hide-based document, that it can have certain holes in it as a result of the preparation. And so as a result, that can actually serve as evidence for you. But just the characteristics of it. So then I'll see many gufo shall get kagon aroch o guts she'ein elu klum sheyesh ke'ela ha'abred. That Rashi points out that if you have something where it's either long or short, well, then that's not going to be a really a good proof, because lots of documents have extra paper, or have especially in the times when paper was being created for that document, or have two very small margins. Basically, the bottom line is that if you print something out and you want as your proof the size of your margins, that's probably not a great proof, because there's probably somebody else who uses the exact same margins that you're using. Okay, so matzao kashur. Now, if in fact you find the get tied up, the kiss, in a bag, ba'arniki, or some kind of chest, mitba or with a signet ring. So the point is that you have something that's really a clear indication that belongs to you. Oshamatzo ben kilav, or you find it among your utensils, and clear Rashi notes here, ben kelaf bebeito, in your house, right? So it's the point is that this is not a place that it would be likely anybody else. Well, then again, afilu lizman meruba kasher, even if it's found after a long period of time, it is kosher. So that's where we got up to yesterday. So let's jump right into the continuation. So Itmar, because we're going to get the halakha, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, halakha shalosh shah adam sham, that according to Rav Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, the halakha is that nobody has stayed there. So that was the acherim, that was the yesh omrim opinion that we had. And Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Shmuel, halakha shalo of our Adam Sham. That is the case is the one where nobody passed there. So it's in that's the view of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. So now the Gemara is going to ask, Lema Mar Halacha Kamar. Why didn't they just say that the halacha was like either the Yesh Omrim or Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar? So Umar Halacha Kamar. Why didn't each of them say exactly who they agreed with? Well, Mishum Da'achilahu, because there's some others that learn these positions in a different viewpoint. So if we take a look at the third line in Rashi, so the third line in Rashi says, Istanai Demafche de Rabbi Shimon liyesh omrim, that there were Tanaim that would mix up, that would switch Rabbi Shimon's opinion and the Yesh Omrim. The Yesh Omrim Rabbi Shimon, and in both directions. So Hilkach imlo his kiru ela shem hachachamim. If they only said who the halacha was like and didn't give their opinion, lo haviyade ahai mitrei lishne kaime. So we wouldn't know who they were thinking like. So by telling us the actual opinion, we not only know who they hold like, but we also know what they actually say is the halacha. Okay, matzah o bechafisa o bedeluskama. So we said that if the get was found in these two kinds of containers, so my chafisa. So what is a chafisa? Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. Rabbi Bar Chana says a chemis katana. It's a small container. This is of course a famous of a chemis mayim is what Abraham gives to Hagar to take with her, and quickly gets used up, and we have the whole story of Hagar being sent out with Yishmael. So that's a chemis. So that there you go. So that's that connection. And my deluskama, what's a deluskama? Talika stisabe. It's some kind of box that older people would use in order to keep their things and not lose them. All right. So now we've dealt with those situations, and now the key is comes to our next Mishnah, and our next Mishnah introduces us to the question of when can we assume that someone is still alive, and it's going to tell us that by detailing three different cases. So let's take a look at the cases. Hamevi get v'hinichu zakein ochola. If you bring a get, if somebody brings a get and they leave behind a husband who is old or not feeling well, so no saying la b'chezkas shehu kayam. He's allowed to. The messenger is allowed to give the get to the wife and presume that the husband is still alive. Of course, this is less of an issue today, because you could just pick up the phone. But in any event, this is much more concern in those days. So Bas Yisrael Hanisua L'Chohein, and what are the implications of this? If the daughter of a non-Kohen was married to a Kohen, so V'halak V'alal Medinas Hayam, and her husband went to the overseas, Ochelas B'Truma B'Cheskas Shehu Kayam. So she's allowed to continue eating truma under the presumption that he's alive. Because after all, he is, likely he is alive. And hashalech chataso medinas hayam. And what's the third case? The third case is if you send a sin offering from overseas. So makrivin ota b'cheskas shehu kayam. Again, you're allowed to presume that the person who sent it, had you bring it, is still going to be alive. Because if the person's not alive, well, then you would not be allowed to bring it, because it could be considered bringing something that is not a korban into the azara, and that's a problem. So, but we assume that the person is still alive, and so you're allowed to bring it. So now that we've dealt with the three cases, so the Gemara distinguishes between types of old people and types of sick people. So, Amar Rava lo shanu elazakin shelo higia legvuros. When we talk about an older person, we're talking about somebody who has not reached the age of gvurot. Gvurot is strength, but in halakhic literature, we say, and in fact there is a pasuk in Tehillim that suggests this, that gvura is the age of 80. And so, as it says we say this Tehillim every Shabbos. This is Tehillim Tzadik 90. That the days of our years, among them are 70 years, and if with strength 80 years. So that's how we have a connection between im bigvura, if with strength. So then shmonim. So then we assume that means 80 years. So according to Rava, if the person's 80 years old, we don't have the ability to just assume that they're still alive. V'chola, and when it comes to a person who is sick, sharov cholim chayim, we say that most of them are still going to be alive, and we can rely on that presumption. Aval zaken shehi yagia legvuros v'goses sharov gosesim lemisa, and a gose, somebody who is in, on their deathbed essentially. So because most of those people are going to die, so then we are not going to have that presumption. So, okay, so now Abaye is going to ask about Rava's change, right? So this is only applying to somebody who's not yet 80 and somebody who's not a gose. So Esve Abaye hamebi get v'hinichu zaken. If we have a brisa that says the following: if you bring a get and the husband's left and he's old, afilu ben mei ashana, even if he's 100 years old, no se la b'cheskas shehu kayam, we are allowed to assume that the husband is still alive. To yuvta, so the Gemara concludes that this actually refutes Rava's position. All right, but we also could actually give another explanation of how it could be consistent with Rava's statement. Kaven de aflig, since he's separated himself, so iflig, so then we can say that he's different. Meaning, if we take a look in Rashi 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down from where it says Gemara in the Rashi. So Kaven de iflig, since Mishar Derech Kol Aretz, since he's distinguished himself from the typical person of the rest of the world, Sheherich Yamim, because he's lived a long time, Ad Mea Shana, until 100, Iflik, so then he's considered different. Ve'enu Kishar Ha'adam, and he's not like other people, Liyot Karov Lamu, to be considered close to death. Aval Ben Shmonim Ve'achat, but somebody who's 81, O Yoter Ad Tishim, who's 81 until 90, well then Karov Lamut Habe. So then he's considered that he's close to death, and so that is going to be, might not have the presumption. Okay. So next, so now we have the Gemara is going to address an apparent contradiction between our Mishnah and a Brisa. So Ramya le Abaye le Rabba. Abaye posed this following contradiction to Rabba. What? Yes, absolutely. We're going to have Rashi. We're going to have Rashi. We just had a Rashi before you just came in. So Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Hamevi get, if somebody's bringing a get, and he left behind a husband who is old or sick, we can still give the get on the presumption that the husband is still alive. Uraminhu. But 1 second, what about the following? Here's your get, Shah Achas Kodam Lamisa. So 1 hour before death, Asura Lechol Betruma Miyad. She's prohibited to eat truma immediately. So how do you understand these two positions? So Amar Le Truma a Gittin Karamis. I don't understand. You're trying to ask from the fact that the person's not allowed to eat truma in connection with whether or not the get can be given. Those are two radically different situations. Truma, Efshar. When it comes to truma, it's possible to avoid the eating truma, and so as a result, we'll just say that we aren't going to presume that the husband's still alive, and so we'll say that she can't eat truma. But get lo Efshar. But when it comes to a get, then it's impossible. Well, 1 second, Varami truma, but you can contradict our Mishnah from the discussion of truma, because what did we say in our Mishnah? Tan Bas Yisrael and Asula Kohen, V'halach Baal Lamdinas Hayam, Ochels Betruma B'Cheskashu Kayam. We say in our Mishnah that she's allowed to be. We're allowed to rely on the fact that the husband is still alive and she can still eat truma. Okay, or minhu, right? Because harei zekitech sha achas kodem misaso asura leachol b'truma miyad. But we had again the brisa referred to the situation where if the man says, "Here's your get," the get won't take effect until an hour before my death. So then that get it immediately prohibits her from eating truma. So now the Gemara is going to offer three different answers. So again, the question is that in our Mishnah, we say that when the husband goes away, the woman can continue to eat truma. But if the husband were to give her a get and say that this get is effective 1 hour before before I die, well, then she's not allowed to eat truma. And again, we're talking about a woman who is not the daughter of a Kohen. She's the Bas Yisrael. And so as a result, she does not have the ability to eat truma on her own if her husband were to divorce her or to die. And her husband is a Kohen, which is why she's allowed to eat truma. So three answers. So the first answer is Amar Rav Adar bar Brei de Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Ada offers the following: Shiny Hassam. The case over there by the Brisa is different. Shaharei Asara Alav Sha'achas Kodem Misaso. Because what did he do? He prohibits her from an hour before his death. And so as a result, that's going to be a unique situation. And that's not going to be like relying on death itself. So Maskifla Rav Papa asked a question. It's a good question. My inspiration. I understand. First, you're saying that we're not worried about the husband's going to die. But one second, maybe the woman's going to die first before her husband, and the divorce will never take effect. So, why does it even make a difference whether or not we're saying that it's an hour before the death? We could come up with an explanation that maybe she's going to die first, and therefore there'll never be a get. So Ella Amar Abaye lo kasha. So Abaye offers an alternative answer that says the following: Lo ha Rabbi Meir de lo chayesh lemisa ha Rabbi Yehuda de chayesh lemisa. No, there's a machlokes that we have about whether or not we worry that about somebody dying when we're not in their presence. So Rabbi Meir does not worry about somebody dying, and Rabbi Yehuda does. And we have a Mishnah that shows this fact. If you buy some wine from Kutim, and so as a result you need to take Truma and Meiser, and yet you don't have another utensil, so what do? Omer, Shnei Lugin Sha'ani Atid Lehafrish. That when I eventually have another utensil that I can separate the wine, so the first 2 lug that I take out of this 100 lug of wine, so I will that will be harez hein truma. That will be my truma, because we say that truma is 1/50th, and 1/50th of 100 is 2. Asara ma'aser rishon, and then 10, just because of rounding, is going to be ma'aser rishon, because we take ma'aser rishon as 10%, and 10% of 98 is roughly 10. So Tisha Meiser Sheni, and then you're left with 88, and now we need to take Meiser Sheni, which is also 10%. Well, 10% of 88 is, again, after rounding, 9. So you'll take off 9 for Meiser Sheni. Umechel, and then you can redeem the Meiser Sheni, Bishosa Miyat, and now you can drink what's left. Of course, you have to make sure not to drink the last 12 lug, the 2 that are for Truma and the 10 that are for Meiser. But the point is that you're able to drink it. Divrei Rebbe Meir. And the point is that we're not worried that the person is going to die and not be able to do the rest of the to bring the Truma and the Meiser. But Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Osrin, but all 3 of them, they say it's prohibited, highlighting the fact that they are worried that somebody will not be able to finish something, will not be able to do the job, maybe because he died. So Rava Amar, so that's the explanation. So now we have so that is the first 2 answers, and now we offer the third answer. Mark this. So now we answer the third answer. The third answer, Amar Rava, as we turn to Kafkat Bet, Shema Meis Lo Chayshinan, Shema Yamos Chayshinan. But when he says that what's the difference between the case of I'm giving you a divorce an hour before I die, and is the person still alive? Well, the difference is maybe we won't say that a person has already died, and we won't be worried about that. But if the question is whether the person is going to die, that we will worry about. And here's the thought: that Rashi explains top line of Rashi and Kochan Bet. We set it up all based on the chazaka. Sheinichu chai. Right now, we left the person and he was alive. The Gabi Kohen shehalach lemedina sayam, and similarly, a Kohen that went overseas, Kavan shelo girsha, if he didn't divorce her, aina neseres, she's not prohibited to eat truma. Elim came mace unless he dies. Aval zu shenosin laget al menas sheyachol shah achas kodem lemisa. So, but somebody who gives a get that says that it's going to apply an hour before or even a minute before he dies, l'shema yamut miyad. When it comes to the possibility of him dying immediately in the future, vaday chashinan, there we will worry. Delo mira la chazaka bahachi, because we don't have a chazaka on that particular issue, and so as a result, that we will be worried about. So now we have three different explanations. Now Rav Masna is going to ask. So Amar le Rav Adel bar Masna le Rava. So Rav Masna asks the following: Hanod. 1 second. Uchashema yamosu upligi. But 1 second. The case that you had, that we originally had three. Where Rabbi Meir disagreed with the other three rabbis, with Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon. That seems to show that we're dealing with a Shema Yamos possibility, right? Maybe the person will die, and yet there was a disagreement about it. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Midiskarta, shiny node the Efsher de Masar Leila Shomer. Nah, don't worry about the case about a if you can put that down, Mark, so that we don't have as much noise, I appreciate it. Mark? Yeah, if you can just leave it. Maybe the case of a wine of the flask is different because you could give the flask to somebody to watch. But 1 second, Rav Masharshia asked, Rav Masharshia, Arvech Arvad. 1 second, even the watcher is going to need a watcher, meaning at the end of the day, you're going to be worried that somebody's going to die. And so the point is that that's not a good answer. So Ella Amarava, Shema Meislo Chashina, when it comes to that a person's already died, we're not worried about it, but Shema Yamos Tanaihi. But when maybe the person will die, so that's a Machlokas Tanaim. Rabbi Meir would not be worried about it, and Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon would be worried about it. So that is the updated three answers for the question of why we differentiate between a situation where a Kohen goes overseas without saying anything to his wife. We don't know. That's the problem. We don't know what happened to him. And a Kohen who goes overseas and says that my wife is going to be divorced an hour before or a minute before I die. Okay, so now we said in our Mishnah a case of sending a sin offering from overseas, but we have a problem because a sin offering you need to lean on it. So we're going to see that answer to that question. 1 second, the owner of it needs to lean on it, and you can't have a leaning outside the base of Migdash. And Tosfos goes through a variety of different situations and comes to the conclusion that we can't deal with that. So Amar Rabbi Yosef, a carbon nashim, must be talking about a chatas of women, because women do not lean on their sacrifices. Rav Papa Amar b'chatas ha'of, or it could be a sin offering that's made from a bird, and bird offerings don't have leaning on them. So those are two possibilities. And now we mentioned three different cases in our Mishnah, and we're going to say why all three are needed. Utsricha. We need all three cases. De'iyashme'in and get. If we only talked about the case where we say that the husband we're going to presume that the husband is still alive. Mishum delo efshar, because that would cause an impossible situation for the wife, because what would she do? We can't say that she's married, and we can't say that she's not married. Aval truma de efshar, but when it comes to the avoiding truma, all right, so you can avoid truma. So amalo, maybe I wouldn't say it there, and so therefore it teaches us about truma to say that even in that case we can presume that the husband is still alive. But in truma, and if we only taught the case of truma, well then to zimnin de lo efshar. There are times where a person does need to eat truma, as Rashi explains, where a Kohen's wife is very poor, she's going to need to eat truma. Maybe I would say that there's a question about whether or not a bird sin offering can be brought. And so as a result, lo leo chulun azara, we shouldn't bring chulun to the azara. So tzricha. So we need to tell all three cases, and therefore we've explained why the Mishnah listed all three. Okay. So now we go to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is going to this Mishnah continues to discuss the presumption of whether someone is still alive. Okay, so we've got a question whether or not we're going to say that somebody's alive. So let's take a look. So Shlosha Dvarim Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Parta Lifnei Chachamim V'Kimus Dvarim. So Rabbi Elazar ben Parta said three things, and the rabbis agreed with him. One, Al Irsha He Kifa Bir Karkom, that if you've got a city that is under siege, and you have a ship that is being tossed at sea, and somebody's about to be tried for a capital case, all three of them, we don't presume that the person is going to die. However, however, if the town has already been captured, or a boat is lost at sea, or the verdict has come in and they're taking the person out to be executed, then we're going to not necessarily assume that he's dead, but we're also not going to assume he's alive. We're going to take the stringencies of both. So what's an example of that? Well, if you have a Bas Yisrael Kohen, a daughter of a non-Kohen who's married to a Kohen, well then Uvas Kohen li Yisrael, or a daughter of a Kohen who's married to a Yisrael, lo tochal b'truma. In both cases, she's not going to be able to eat truma. The daughter of a non-Kohen who's married to a Kohen, we're going to presume that the Kohen is dead, and so she can't eat truma because she's no longer married to the Kohen. And the daughter of a Kohen who's married to a Yisrael, we're going to assume that the Yisrael is still alive, so she can't eat truma. So that's how we're going to be strict in both directions. So now our Gemara is going to be our Mishnah is going to be qualified by Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says the following, and we're going to offer one version, the first version of Rav Yosef's qualification today, and the second we'll wait till tomorrow. So Rav Yosef, Bebeis Din Shel Yisrael. When we talk about a court that is taking somebody out to execute, and we are unsure whether or not they are dead, and we're going to be strict in both directions, that's talking about a Jewish court. But when it comes to a non-Jewish court, once they conclude their decision to kill somebody, they're definitely going to execute them because they don't have the safeguards to ensure that maybe if some new fact comes around, that they will want to try and save him. We have a rule that actually there's a requirement that there's somebody be on a horse with essentially a cloth in their hand, that if, in case the rabbis come up with a basis to say that the person shouldn't be killed, he'll be able to run quickly to the place where they're going to kill the guy, wave his flag and say, hey, don't kill the guy. So we have that special protection. So that's why in our situation, we're not going to presume that the person's dead. But in the non-Jewish court, so we'll presume that the person's dead. Now, Abaye asked the logical question, Amrle Abaye, based in Shalov de Kochavim, Nami, also when it comes to a court of non-Jews, we should also be worried that maybe the person's alive. To Makabli Shochada, after all, they take bribes. So Amrle, so Rav Yosef explained, no, Kishakle, we're talking about when do they take bribes? Mikame delachtom parse shenamag. That it's before the final verdict has been signed. But Lavasar de Michtam parse to shenamag lo shakle. But once they actually signed on the bottom line, well, then they don't want to look like foolish by taking a bribe at that point, and so as a result, even the bribe won't be sufficient. So now when the Gemara asks, Meisvei, 1 second, we've got a Mishnah that seems to suggest a different view. That again, in our current view, when you have a non-Jewish court, we presume the guy's dead. Whereas if we have a Jewish court, we have to say take the stringencies of both him being dead and him being alive. But what about the following Mishnah? This Mishnah is from Makos. So Kol Makom Sheyamdu, anytime Shnayim Vayomru, then two people get up and say the following, that Me'idin Anu as Ish Ploni, we testify about this particular person, Shenigbar Dino Beves Dino Shel Ploni, that the following court imposed the death sentence on this guy, Uploni Edab, and these were the witnesses, Harei Zeh Yeharei, that person gets put to death. So, so the bottom line is, it seems like we are not worried about a Jewish person from a Jewish court having a decision that says that the person is not going to be executed. Dilma Boreach Shiny. So the Gemara answers, oh, well, that's different, because in that situation, the person was a fugitive. And so when it comes to a fugitive who ran away, so then we're going to assume that in fact the verdict was actually a definitive verdict and had no caveats associated with it. All right, so now that we've tried that, so again, we challenge Rav Yosef's effort from the following brisa: Tashma Shama based in Shel Yisrael Shahayu Omrim Ish Ploni Mace Ish Ploni Nerag. If somebody hears in a Jewish court that they said that somebody died or somebody was executed, Yesiu Ishto, that wife, the wife of that person is allowed to marry. But Mekuman Trisin Shel Ovde Kuchavim. But when it comes to the people who are executors of, in non-Jewish courts, Ish Ploni Mace, if they say that somebody died, Ploni Nerag Ish, or somebody was executed, Al Yasiu Ish Esishto, his wife is not allowed to marry. So I don't understand. We said that when it comes to a non-Jewish court, once the decision is in, we have a presumption that the person is killed. And when it comes to the Jewish court, once that we do not have the presumption that somebody was killed. And yet this seems to suggest otherwise, because my mesu, my neherag. What does it mean that the person died or the person was executed? If you're saying that the person literally died, the nerag mamish, and the person who was executed was really actually executed, the kavase gabiov de kochavim, amailo yasiu as ishdo. Why couldn't you listen to the person who was talking about from a non-Jewish court? Because any non-Jew who speaks honestly, who speaks innocently, and does not know the ramifications of what he's saying, we are allowed to believe him. So as a result, it must be that we're talking about Elalav Meis Yotze Lamus. We're talking about when we say that he died, we're saying that he was taken out to be killed, to die. Or Nerag Yotze Lehareg, or when it says that he was executed, he was going to be taken out to be executed. Meaning, Meis Yotze Lamus could be like Goses, somebody who's on his deathbed. V'katani B'veisdin Yisrael Yasiu Esishto. And yet we say that in the Jewish court you're allowed to marry the woman, and so we have a conflict with Rav Yosef's statement, because Rav Yosef says we have to be strict in both directions when it comes to a Jewish court. So la'olam meis mamish. So no, in fact, we're going to say that it really means that he literally died. V'nerag mamish. And when it comes to being killed, it means he was executed. He was actually executed. Because, and what about the non-Jewish case? So you're going to ask me, why don't we believe the non-Jew when he says that the person was actually died or actually executed? Amilo, why don't we believe him? So Hai Kaimalan to Komasich Lafi Tumo Hemunimahemne. And because after all, we say that when the person speaks innocently, we're going to believe what they have to say. So that is only true, that we'll believe the person when there isn't a self-interest involved. But aval milsa de shaychiba. But when it comes to this other situation, and remember, we're talking about the executioner who's making this statement. And so as a result, he has an interest to say that everybody he was supposed to take out to be executed, it was executed. So as a result of al milsa de shaychiba, adi de alachazuke shiakrayun. So, but with that situation, we have to be worried that maybe they would lie. And Rashi explains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 the shaychiba ki haka, like in this case, shemisfarim shahargu bedin, because people, the non-Jews, will get pleasure or be, have a better reputation in their eyes if they kill people in judgment, because that will show that they're very much pro law enforcement. So avidid l'shak, and so as a result, they will say something that's not true. V'lomar nerag, and they'll say that he was killed, afal pisha lo ra'uhu, even though they didn't actually see that he was killed, eli yotze lidon, but they only saw that he was taken out for judgment, and we don't know what the story was. So that was one view of Rav Yosef's qualification of our Mishnah. So again, our Mishnah just told us that a court that has found somebody guilty is considered, the person is considered, we have to take the stringencies of whether he's alive or whether he's dead, but it didn't tell us what kind of court. And so Rav Yosef said that that was talking about a Jewish court, but a non-Jewish court, we could presume that the person was killed. Now we're going to have a different view, an alternative view, an Ikad Amri, but with another view of what Rav Yosef said. But for that, you'll have to turn back in for tomorrow's daf. Have a fabulous day. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Have a good day.
Today's no taste.
No taste.